was going to come to your company and say, "Hey, Ian,
yeah.
what do you do again? Oh, I can use you." That kind of thing. You never know what business development.
Hello and welcome to episode 130 of Rockstar CMO FM. The M is the marketing and the F is the well you decide. As you're probably wondering, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? I'm your host Ian Truscott. I'm no rockstar, but I've picked up a thing or two over the last 20 years on my tour from techie to CMO and trusted advisor, and each week I chat to the true rockstars, my fabulous guests and chums, and share with you some marketing street knowledge that I hope will inspire your inner rockstar. Come say hello. We are Rockstar CMO on Twitter and LinkedIn, and proud members of the Marketing Podcast Network. This episode was recorded on Friday the 2nd of September 2022. Where is this year going? Hope you've had a good week. You are well, safe, and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. On this week's episode, Jeff Clark and I chat about growth and product marketing in the marketing studio. I go backstage with startup marketing expert and podcast host Seth Goldstein, and I wind down the week in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar with Robert Rose for a cocktail and a marketing thought. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back after this word. We'll be right back after this word.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the boys' club of advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
On to our first segment, the Marketing Studio with Jeff Clark, Rockstar CMO advisor and former Forrester Serious Decisions research director. This week, we chat about product marketing for growth. Welcome back, Jeff, to Rockstar CMO FM, the Rockstar CMO FM studio.
Yes.
With Jeff Clark.
Yes, here with our studio musicians.
How are you? And you've been on holiday, even though you very kindly gave me a little extra that I could add into last week's show.
Yes, we're not supposed to let the listeners know that when we're not actually in the studio. But I was off on the coast of Maine, northern New England, right on the water, looking out at a beautiful view and disconnected from most of the rest of the world.
Yes, including the editor of Rockstar CMO. So that's fantastic.
It was such a great week because of that.
So you're completely unplugged, and our obsession with the weather. We need to start there. What was the weather like? How was your break?
So the weather was great because, for one, it was a lot cooler than in the heat of the valley. As a matter of fact, it was hot until we basically got to the coast, and then it's just like it dropped, 10, 15 degrees Fahrenheit. And as they always say in Maine, if you don't like the weather, just wait because it'll change. And so I would be out on my kayak, and all of a sudden the fog rolls in. And I'm like, geez, I don't want to get run over by a lobster boat. And then, so I would park myself, and then the fog would lift. I'd be like, oh, okay.
Beautiful.
Off to go.
Beautiful. That sounds splendid. So, and when you came back, I'm assuming you didn't pick that up when you were away because you were completely unplugged.
Actually picked it up before I went away.
Oh, did you? Oh, splendid. Well, the topic for this week is what you picked up. And this week, we're going to talk about an article from your old chums over at Forrester. 4 tips on finding and spearheading new strategies for growth by Beth Kaplow, one of your old chums, right? Mm-hmm. VP of something and senior analyst over there.
VP of something and directing something, and
I didn't check my notes. Sorry. Let me be a bit more polite. She is a VP and principal analyst at Forrester.
Yes,
right. Do it properly. I can't go offending Forrester. And when you shared this article with me, actually, what I quite liked about it is she talks about ask any product or portfolio marketer if they think their role is to help the organization grow, and they'll certainly say yes. So from us, Jeff, there's no objection to that, right? So a marketer that's focused on growth, great. And then she says, but the reality is that one more round of messaging or one more white paper or video contributes only marginally to that goal. So basically she's saying, we marketers just jump back on the hamster wheel, ignore the fact that we think we need to do growth, don't look at what we're doing, and just run.
And as long as we're getting fed our hamster meal, we are okay with that.
Cool. So we'll get onto that in a moment, because I'm really interested in why we think that people is how do we actually get our focus back onto growth and get off of this hamster wheel. But firstly, just for some of the listeners, I don't know if they are aware of the terms that Forrester use in terms of product marketing and portfolio marketing. What do they mean by the term portfolio marketing?
So portfolio, it's just trying to generically speak to various forms of products, services, industry, segment, business. So to me, it's kind of a misnomer in that, we associate these individuals with particular, whatever their domain is, a product or something like that. But really their focus should be on the customer and understanding, the customer in relation to your offerings. So yes, but portfolio is meant to be, it does nothing to do with, as we were, talking beforehand about stationery or your your investment portfolio or any of those other things. It's just trying to, again, genericize a type of title, because I think that the role is very similar, and certainly the sort of advice we were giving to people about how to, the best practices related to, product marketing, industry marketing, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. So, I mean, are the terms interchangeable? So if we're going to talk about product marketing, we could talk about portfolio marketing in the same kind of way. Okay, that makes sense. So let's get going then. So if we're going to jump off our hamster wheel and contribute to growth, which is what we all want to do, where do we start then?
A lot of the in particular, Beth's blog really kind of starts focusing on what the obstacles are, which is as you say, they want to keep you on the wheel, turning out those white papers, but it's like, you really want to step back and, kind of like in any role, it's like if you feel like you're not contributing to the company that the way you think you should be, then, let's take a broader perspective, and for the, product or portfolio marketer, you really want to start with the customer needs and determine, do we have unmet needs out there? And you may be asked to, see, how are we going to grow to a certain, revenue level, or how are we going to grow this product, whatever. And again, you want to take the focus off of the product for a moment, and then go back to the customer and say, does our target buyer that we're focused on, do they have additional needs that we're not meeting, so we could actually grow our wallet share within that buyer? Does the organization, do they have other buying centers with either needs that we can service that are similar, or similar products and services we offer, or something similar, which, kind of getting into that land and expand. I'm focused on HR, but can I get over into, manufacturing? Yeah. Can I get over into, some other department within the organization? Or are there other organizations in other markets that have similar needs? So I'm saying, if I'm focused on legal, the legal market, can I actually, step back and say, well, there are other firms like accounting, et cetera, that might have similar needs. So how do I serve them? So it's always just trying to start from that initial understanding that you're successful with in terms of understanding buyer needs, and see how you can grow that out and make that the engine that, or say the input that's the engine to your growth.
I like that, and because you're talking about needs in terms of market needs rather than needs in a specific account, right? So I'm always a big advocate of creating personas based on needs, right, and clustering people based on needs. So it's kind of revisiting that, isn't it? It's just presuming that you've done that process, revisiting what the needs are around the whole persona, and then where in your target accounts you can expand into from your current, your normal sponsor or your normal department you go into, and then where you've been successful in a particular segment or category or industry is then how can you move out of that, right? Yeah. I think that's interesting because normally marketers and sales, we often think the other way around though, don't we? We're normally very slow to focus like that. So do you find that organizations find themselves in that position where they have that focus and there is an opportunity to grow?
Well, the thing is, I think, if you're, like you said correctly, it's like, you focus on a persona because a persona has a particular buying need. And it's like, but usually you end up locking in on that persona is a certain set of titles in a certain set of accounts. And then you get salespeople who are good at, selling to, just HR in manufacturers or shop floor control in and it's like, okay, well, there's other, and I certainly, it's the number of companies that I've worked for, it's like you'd say, okay, we're doing a certain thing and we're successful in manufacturing, but there's people in retail that actually would approach their workforce the same way, and there's actually people in healthcare, so we need to be broadening the scope out and then thinking about what are our obstacles to get us to those other, unmet needs, again, which could be different people within the same account. It could be different accounts. It could be different markets. I mean, it can be expanded a number of ways, but that's the easiest way to develop a path to growth as opposed to going off and, coming up with some brand new wild strategy that has nothing to do with your existing business.
Right. So I understand that's cool, but we still recommend that people focus first, then move out, right?
Yes.
From that, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first tip, is to look at the unmet needs around your target audience and the market. So what's the next step?
Well, the next step is to get the best available market sizing data. So, so again, once you've determined that there's some areas that you can branch out to get those unmet needs, and then the next question is going to be, well, how big a market is that? And oftentimes, and I think you and I in our probably our experience when we were together at a previously mentioned company we won't bring up today. Said, it'd be like, well, what's the size of that market? How big can it be? And it's and sometimes, you're reluctant as a product marketer. You may be reluctant to say, well, I don't have really good data, or maybe I have incomplete data to really understand what the size of that market would be. Yeah. But you want to work with the data that you've got available to make the best guesses and not worry too much about being 100% accurate. You're trying to say, what's our, total address, what's out there, what's the total addressable market, what's our total serviceable market, so what do we think we could actually service? And then if we're thinking about how this might be a multi-year plan to get us to our growth, well, what should our target be, this year, next year, as we're building this out? And frankly, it's one of these things where, if you don't feel you've got the data, then it's like you got to go to the analysts, go to the, go to any sort of resources you have to see if you can find the best available data. And I know one of the things I just had an early experience when in my short term in product marketing, where it's like we had come up with an add-on product to a platform, and the VP of product was absolutely determined that we need to let people know this is a big opportunity. And so we made some, wild ass guesses that lot of people in the rest of the company said, I don't think so. And so I certainly realized that it's like, rather than the wild ass guess, you want to make a more educated guess. And given what I know today, I would have done a better job at creating with a better guess.
I think it's often overlooked and completely forgotten often, because I think what often happens to us marketers is the product exists, or the product gets developed, or somebody has an idea, and then it's go take that to market. And there isn't that. I mean, I'm having a conversation that will go live in next week's show with a CMO that I just recorded this week, and he was talking about the fact, Andrew Davis from Paddle, and he was talking about that he likes to look at this from top down. Start off with what's the total addressable market, total serviceable market, rather than start with having a solution to a problem that you haven't defined and know whether anybody wants to buy, right? So I think that's really interesting. So, and it's so often overlooked. So I think the addressable market thing is so important. So that's cool.
And so, if you take it from both directions, sort of top down and then bottom up from what your current state is, then that's how you sort of figure out what the gaps are. How do we get from here we are point A into where we think we can be in 2 or 3 years with that total addressable market, and then and then you start solving for those gaps.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the first 2 steps. One of them is to determine the unmet needs, both in your persona, in the market, in the industries that you're looking at. Then get some great data about what that addressable market looks like. So what's your third idea?
Don't let the executives call the shots, which actually relates to my previous example. Executive not mentioned either. But it's like, many of us have been in companies where, the CEO is going to say, we got to get to $1 billion in, 3 years, or we got to get to a certain, revenue. And it's, and often, and certainly one of the companies I work at, the CEO was one of his failings was always making big ass goals that were hard to attain, and it was and the idea was it makes you work harder. So even though I know you're not going to get to that goal, I know you're going to work your tail off to get to as best as you can. So there's I guess there's a certain strategy involved in that, but I think the thing is that if you're in this portfolio product marketing role and you're trying to take some charge of understanding how to help the company grow, then you need to develop the knowledge about how your products and services can serve the market, and be the one who is armed with the data, and the rational thinking to get to those goals. So either, if the executives are making big goals, you can either help them. It's like, okay, let's take this into its little pieces, and let's say, here's how we could get to that goal. And then as you get into the details, you can see where either whether the goal is not correct, or whether there is a path to get there, or there's a path to get to something that is on the way to that bigger ass goal that becomes realistic. And and again, solving for what are the issues, if we go back to the example of we were selling into manufacturing, and now we got to move over into retail, and then we got to move over into healthcare. It's like, okay, so does that require new salespeople? Certainly requires new positioning, understanding, a need, even though it's the same need in a different market. They're going to use different terms. They're going to talk about it differently. There may be different pain points that cause that need. So all that's got to be built out, as well as making sure the rest of the organization has the tools to actually, take advantage of that opportunity and turn it into revenue.
Yeah, but that, to your point about not letting the executives call the shots, that's really so connected to the marketing sizing data, isn't it? Is to your point, is quite often you'll work with a CEO that has a revenue aspiration for the company and has a target which is potentially completely unrelated to what the market size is for that product, right? And so it might be that they're looking for 50% penetration in the market with their product in year 1, which is going to be ridiculous, right? So that's, I think, that top-down approach of look at the market size before you start determining what those targets are, right? And CEOs sometimes don't do that.
Yeah, or the head of sales might say, I've got 50 reps who are bringing in whatever, a couple $1 million a year, or so whatever the ratio is, and it's if I had 3 more reps, I get to this amount. If I had 10 more reps, I get, or and every person running their part of the business may have their own metrics by which they think they can get to a certain level of growth, whether they're in sales, service, product, and it's like, okay, so we've got to look at the market and the realities before we actually determine what we think those goals should be. Yeah,
and it's the same with not just with the core products, but with the add-ons. I think is the point you were making earlier on, and your example of, it may be only 20% or 10% of your market choose that add-on because they're using a competitor's product already. So you're flying in the face of that.
Yeah, or you're getting into, in that particular case, you're getting into a space that has much bigger competitors doing things that the customer is going to take advantage of before they look at your little add-on.
Yeah, cool. So those are the first 3. I think you started straying into your 4th, if I look at my notes here. So
I could be straying in my 4th.
So we've determined the unmet needs. We've gone back to our data. We've pushed back against the executives, which is often easier said on a podcast than it is to do. But we've given that a go.
Absolutely.
But what's the 4th point that we
building?
How do we make this happen?
Consensus, and so particularly again, we were mentioning a number of different types of executives from different functions, and it's like you really want to get everybody on board. So in your product marketing role, being the person who is socializing, getting the right data, doing the proper sizing of the opportunity, understanding the total addressable market, serviceable market, et cetera, determining what the gap, and again, when you're working with the different functions, it's like, okay, what's the gap for us to get into that new vertical, or what's the gap for us to get to that new buyer? So, you want to help them solve the problem and lay the roadmap out, because typically these things are not, it's not, we're doing this, one thing this year, or next year we're going to succeed at expanding our market with a whole new strategy. It usually takes, years to come to fruition. So it's like you got to build a roadmap of how we're going to get to, hitting those growth goals. And it's all about consensus building. And certainly, product marketers and even product managers, we didn't really get into the difference there, but it's like those are probably 2 roles that are really essential for consensus building across multiple functions. Yeah,
but it's quite tricky, isn't it? Because like you said just a moment ago, if you're moving into a different market or industry, then you don't know whether those skills exist in the sales team in order to address that. There's going to be a different language that industry uses to the one you're existing. There's a sales enablement issue right there.
Absolutely.
There's addressing all of those gaps. Right. Okay. And then you say finally to build that roadmap, right? That is what you just said, to address those gaps. So that's splendid. So those are the 4 points to turn our portfolio of product marketers into little growth engines rather than running around on their hamster wheels.
Chug. Yeah.
So determining the unmet needs, I'll summarize like I always do when we got a list. We love a list. Determine the unmet needs of your persona and your industry. Get the best available marketing sizing data, which I think should be number 1, really, almost there, shouldn't it? And then don't let the executives call the shots. Good luck with that one. And the 4th one, to build consensus, because you're going to need friends once you push
if
back.
anybody wants to call us for counseling advice with the executives.
All right, so we've done the weather in Maine. We've done the topic. The last item on our agenda in the studio is, what song are you picking this week, mate?
Salisbury Hill by Peter Gabriel, and reluctantly we dip back into the 70s. This was from 1977, but this was he was talking about being part of the machinery. And a trip he took, walking up Salisbury Hill to determine what he wanted to be his next role in his career. It's actually very autobiographical in his, in his own little way. But it's a great song about. It's a great song. It's a great song about personal change. So I thought it was very appropriate.
Yeah, from 1977. And as we were preparing to record, I made out that I'd never heard of it. and then when I played it, it's like a song from my youth for sure. So I shall play out with Salisbury Hill by Peter Gabriel from 1977. And most importantly, will I see you in the marketing studio with Jeff Clark next week?
I'll be here because I'll always be here with me. So whether you're here or not is another question.
All right, mate. I look forward to it. I'll see you next week.
Okay. Cheers.
So I went from day to day. My life was in a rut till I thought of what I'd say, which connection I should cut. I was feeling part of the scenery. I walked right out of the machinery. My heart going boom, boom, boom. Hey, he said, grab your things out from the table.
Thank you, Jeff. That was Salisbury Hill by Peter Gabriel from 1977. Get in touch with us through our website, rockstarcmo.com, if you have any suggestions or comments about the topics we discuss. We would love to hear from you. Time to go backstage with my guest. Seth Goldstein is the founder and principal creative director at Goldstein Media, a full-service digital marketing agency located just north of Philadelphia in historic Doylestown, Pennsylvania. As you'll hear, recovering journalist Seth specialises in helping startups and biotechnology life sciences companies get found online using digital marketing strategies. He's a fellow podcaster with two podcasts, Entrepreneurs Enigma and Digital Marketing Dive, and for almost a decade has published the popular Marketing Junto newsletter. And he's a really nice chap. Hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome, Seth, to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you?
I'm doing great, Ian.
Splendid. And you're a fellow podcaster like me on the Marketing Podcast Network. But aside from that, for people that don't know you, Seth, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I am a I'm a recovering journalist, also known as former journalist, turned digital marketer. So some people say I joined the dark side. I think I joined the light side because journalism was kind of wacky. Did newspapers for 6 years out of college, did some sales in between, then went into digital marketing, and haven't looked back. 15 years later, I'm still doing Goldstein Media. So based out of Philadelphia, wife, child, dog, living the American dream, I guess.
Living the dream. And I was going to ask you about that. Well, I'll ask you about your background as well in a moment. But you founded Goldstein Media almost 15 years ago, LinkedIn told me.
Yeah.
Tell us what it is that you do during the day.
So Goldstein Media started as a way for me to get the experience to get the job, to get the experience to get the job.
Wow.
And I forgot to get the job. And I just kind of kept going. I did do a brief foray at Merck in their social media department for about a year and a half. But other than that, there's version 1 of Goldstein Media and there's version 2 of Goldstein Media with that little foray in corporate America where I realized I do not like corporate America that much. It's a whole different beast. And so Goldstein Media, we specialize in doing website design, SEO, some SEM, some paid marketing online. We do a lot of digital marketing strategy for companies, email marketing, and we've dabbled in podcast production for some people because they see that we do podcasts and they're like, can you help us out? So it's more strategy with them than actually editing their podcast, thank God, because that could be a nightmare. And our
It's my Saturday mornings.
Yeah, exactly. Mine's like literally I do the podcasts.
Yeah.
I edit them right away because if I don't, I forget where I want to get rid of the silly bits.
Yeah.
So... But
I'll
yeah,
just
so
leave those bits in.
I'll leave a lot of them in, but sometimes there's like I'll say something and I'll elaborate for them, but it's smoother if I get rid of that one little part where I'm elaborating for them.
Yeah.
And so thank God for Descript. I can just read it and say cut that little piece out.
Sorry, I distracted you there. So you do a whole range of digital marketing services then, and you mainly focus, what did you say, biotech and startups?
Biotech and startups. We get drag kicking and screaming into other industries as well, like home remodeling contractors. We do a lot of those websites, but like I said, it's not a niche per choice. It's a niche because one of my friends' companies we sub for them and we do their sites for them. But really, it's biotech and startups. And it's kind of funny because biotech tends to be startups.
Yeah.
So it's kind of all-encompassing. We still do business websites for lawyers and whoever wants a website. We're not going to say no. We're just not going to go after them.
Right. And you're based in Philly.
We're based just north of Philly.
Yeah.
About 20 miles north, but it takes an hour and 10 minutes to get those 20 miles in. Go figure.
Sounds like the traffic around here, mate. So
The traffic's abominable.
So as we just said a couple of times, you specialize in startups and biotech. What is it that you like about working with early stage companies like that?
They are easy to mold their idea of marketing. They come in, they're saying, we have no idea what we're doing. Or they say, we know what we're doing, and you say, no, you don't. And you then train them on what they need to do.
Yeah.
A lot of them are very green. But, the idea is that they have some funding behind them that they can afford us. And then we kind of coach them along the way because Goldstein Media is pretty much a perpetual startup. We're constantly remolding and pivoting and saying, let's try this out, let's try that out.
Yeah.
And the thing with biotech kind of came along because I'm in the biotech capital of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, anywhere from North Carolina straight up through Boston is all biotech. And literally about a mile from my house is a biotech incubator. So I'm sitting here in Doylestown, and I'm looking at, well, what niches do I want to be in? Because I was doing all kinds. I wanted to focus a little bit more. And I'm like, well, I do want to do startups because they're fun, and I'm getting some startup business. Well, let's focus on those. And I'm like sitting here, and then I get a call from the biotech center down the street, and they're like, let's have coffee. And I'm like, that makes sense. Why not that? Because it can't be more blatant than there being a biotech center a mile from your house.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and is that the advice you'd give to other people who want to do freelancing or form their own agency, is to specialize and focus on what it is, or just happens?
Yeah, I've been struggling with that, actually, because for 14 years I didn't have a focus per se. I did everything left, right, and center. But it's nice to say a niche does not mean that you can't do other stuff. A niche means you just focus your marketing, your efforts on those industries.
Right.
You go after those industries. But if Joe Bob Pool Supply wants you to work for them and you want to do the website, just because you're target, they're not your target, doesn't mean you can't do it. No one's saying you can't do this. No, do what you want.
Yeah. But it's often difficult, isn't it, when you're starting your own company, and especially when you're freelancing, to get that focus. You tend to say yes to everything, don't you, at first, because you're worried.
You kind of have to.
To
get some projects under your belt, you kind of can't niche right away.
Right.
You can niche, I think, about after a year, after you have some things, you can see what you enjoyed the most, what you enjoyed the least, and then decide then. But I find these companies that niche right away, say, we're only doing lawyer websites. Then you're scrambling to get only lawyer websites. Yeah.
Do you think your clients recognize the niche expertise that you have, and it's an important thing for them? So, do you think it's important that people find their niche, so then they've got that value in that community?
I think a lot of people think that their projects are special. I mean, I'm being blunt here. I mean, a lot of people are like, "Have you ever done a pool supply company website before?" No.
Yeah.
Well, you're not special. I can do your site. It's like if I only did pool supply company websites, I'd be out of business. Everyone thinks they're special. Everyone thinks that you need to have one of them in your portfolio first.
Yeah.
No, I mean, well, a website's a website is a website is a website.
Yeah.
I mean, you need to have some background knowledge, and you learn about the client as you go. But you don't have to specialize in a special site to work with that client.
Right. And so back to your startup clients.
Yeah.
Is there like advice you find yourself giving these entrepreneurs over and over again? What's the most popular? So popular is the wrong word. What's the most frequently given piece of advice you find yourself giving to these startups and these
Stop
entrepreneurs?
overthinking.
Really?
Because I think they overthink everything. And I think that they're kind of predisposed to that because they're VCs or at them, or they're angel investors, or their mom and dad, for that matter, for friends and family rounds. They're overthinking every move. And sometimes you just kind of got to say, all right, let's just throw something out there and let's see how it works. Let's not spend $10 million on this thing, but just get something up there and just kind of go and stop. Think. Don't not think, but don't overthink.
Right. And then to flip that around, I talk to a lot of marketers, obviously, on this show, as you know, because you're a listener. Thank you very much.
Love the show.
What's the what advice would you give to marketers wanting to work with startups? Is it the flip side of that they need to sort of be that guide to help these companies not overthink, or do you think there's a certain mindset you need to work with a startup if you're a marketer?
You need to be persistent. Because a lot of these startups are like, yeah, we want to go. And then like they're silent for 3 months because they have to get funding. They're focusing on other things. That doesn't mean they don't want to work with you. It means that they're just busy.
Right.
And you just need to once a week, just drop them a note saying, hey, just checking in. How are things going? Don't automatically go back to saying, when are we going to work together? Just check in, see how things are going. How's the funding round going? How's the incubator going? Just be a colleague, be a friend, be a supporter. And then every once in a while say, hey, when do you think you're going to be ready to get started, kind of thing. But persistence is the one.
Oh, I like that. I really like that advice. And I think that's a really good point, isn't it? Because usually a startup's got 3 or 4 important people in it. And if they're going for funding, if you've ever been in that kind of environment, it is 24/7, isn't it? You're just totally focused on trying to get that funding. And it's really hard. And keeping the business going. And it's a real big distraction.
And you want that fund, and as the marketer, you want them to get the funding so they can pay for it.
Absolutely. So back to your career. You mentioned being a recovering journalist, I think was the word.
A former journalist who's recovering. Yeah, a recovering journalist.
I see that.
Yeah, and it's just, I think the podcasting is just an offshoot of my love for journalism. So.
Right. And I've actually spoken to a couple of senior marketers here that started off as journalists. And I think some of that is from the storytelling. And so what inspired you to take the first marketing job? How did you make that transition from being a journalist?
I burned out. I mean, we're talking about massive burnout.
Really?
I was a cops reporter, emergency beat reporter. I saw some pretty gnarly things. Didn't really deal with it in the moment. It took 6 years to decompress from that job.
Wow.
I did it for 6 years, and it took another 6 years to decompress from it. Only recently doing that can I somewhat watch the show Chicago Fire. Because for the longest time, it would give me flashbacks.
Wow.
I would have full-on PTSD from that job.
Wow.
I lived it. I loved it. I overdid it.
Wow. I should not have laughed. That's a serious issue.
It's serious. Because a lot of people think, all right, so officers get their counseling sometimes forced upon them. All emergency services, they have counseling available to us.
Yeah.
My counseling was doing the obituary the next day.
Oh gosh.
Which is kind of funny because it actually was helpful because you gave them closure.
Yeah.
Thus, you got closure because you heard about the person's story, not just about them wrapped around a tree.
Wow.
Yeah, it was an experience to say the least. And then, I don't get that kind of stuff now.
No, and so what was your first gig? What was your first marketing gig, and how did that go from?
My first marketing gig was Goldstein Media.
Really?
I literally right out of the gate, I was like, I have to get the experience to go get that marketing job or that web design job at the time. It morphed into marketing, and I had been doing web design on the side since '98.
Wow.
And so my then fiance, my now wife, was like, why don't you go back to school, this tie up the loose ends on the web design. So I went back and got a certificate at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia.
Wow.
And got started pretty much. And, I'm fortunately, kind of wacky. I didn't look back, and I kind of kept going, except for that one foray into corporate America. I really have been 15 years in this business doing my own thing.
Wow. And 98, that was a time, wasn't it, for webs to get into websites? Your timing couldn't have been better. What inspired you? Was it just you saw this thing happening on the web while you were doing your journalism?
It was creative.
Yeah.
When in 98, I was a junior in high school, and a company came, the son of a development director came to Career Day. He was a web designer. And he just started talking about what you can do on the web. And I had been on the web a little bit here and there poking around, but I was like, wait, I can build something of my own on there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. And and then I had to figure out FTP out. I had to figure out hosting out. Remember, there was a place called freeservers.com. I think they're still there, but they're all spam sites now.
Yeah.
So I got a free server to put something on. I made websites about Abraham Lincoln because I was a history buff. I made all kinds of. I mean, there's some of them are still out there. I still every once in a while, someone's like, "Is this you?" I'm like, "No," but it is. I'm like, that's not me.
It's you from a long time ago. It's a different you.
I'll forget the domain names after a while. I think it was giantmomen.am.com or something like that.
Wow.
If that's still up there, please forgive me. It was all frames. I used to think this was the coolest thing. Frames. I used to think they were so cool how you could just have your navigation to stay and have the internal page move.
Yeah.
Turns out it was terrible for SEO.
Yeah. Flashing HTML is one of the other popular choices back then.
Oh, the scrolling marquee. That was classic.
Yes. Oh, man. This isn't really fair on a lot of our listeners. Anybody under the age of, I don't know, 30 or 40 or something like that, as we wander down memory lane. But yeah, I was there. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
So that's been what you've done all of the, not just your life, almost the life of the internet, almost, isn't it?
Yeah. Give or take, because you make me feel royalty and things. But no, 94, 95 was the internet. Came out. I mean, it was DARPANET, it was ARPANET, it was all that stuff before. But the internet, worldwide, ever since the World Wide Web, it was pretty much since the beginning of the World Wide Web. Imagine that, kids.
Yeah. Well, crazy times, and the crazy times of the 2000 .com crash and all that kind of stuff you've been through. So so let's bring you back a bit more up to date rather than us living here in the midst of time. Your podcast, Entrepreneur's Enigma. So that's really interesting because you're talking to entrepreneurs. What's the enigma that you're searching for in that podcast?
I think in entrepreneurship in general is a giant puzzle, which is what Enigma stands for.
Yeah.
You go into it, you think you have an idea, you go for it, and you're really putting together a jigsaw puzzle, trying to figure out, will this idea work?
Yeah.
And plus it was a cool name, and the URL was available.
Ever the pragmatic there, Seth. It's like, the URL was available. So what's the thing you've learned most, or what do you think listeners learn most from your podcast, from the entrepreneurs you've spoken to?
I think a lot of people realize that it is a grind, that these successful entrepreneurs had their fails and they learned from them, that that we're only seeing the success now because it's public, but a lot of them went through a lot of iterations.
Yeah. You hear that a lot about successful people, isn't it? The number of mistakes they made before they actually struck on something.
You only hear about the good things. You only hear about all the tripping that they do.
Yeah. And how long have you been doing Entrepreneur's Enigma?
About since 2021. Since 21.
Wow. And as if you're not busy enough, you've also got another podcast, Digital Marketing Dive.
That wrapped its third season. We only did 10 episodes this season because I couldn't handle more than that. That one is on its third season. That one I started in 2018. Yeah. And I've had 3 co-hosts on that. So it's a little harder to manage because it's a co-host show. So I have to manage not only our schedules, but the guest schedule. So it's like 3 people you have to organize and wrangle and herd. Yeah. So that one is a little bit more difficult to do, but that's a little bit more marketing. And we talked to different people. We talked to Rand Fishkin on there. We talked to... We have to get Ian on there at some point next season. But it's not... so that way I can talk to people that are maybe CMOs who are... maybe founders, but are also in the digital marketing space. So.
Yeah. And do you find that these 2 podcasts, they blend with your work? So do you talk to prospective clients and that kind of stuff? Do you find that podcasting is part of your marketing strategy?
Oh, Entrepreneur's Enigma is fully a marketing tool.
Right.
I mean, it's sweet that I can be on the Marketing Podcast Network and making some money, making a stipend. Yeah, which is, I'm not going to argue with a few $100 every 3 months. I mean, I'm not killing it, but it's getting me in front of people that I want to talk to. And it's giving me a reason to reach out to them on LinkedIn and connect. And then they can see my posts and my connections and everything I do on there. And eventually, long term, it might turn into something.
Yeah. It's a bit like what I'm doing here with Rockstar CMO. It was a lockdown project, and I wanted to reach out and talk to my network. And I thought, well, I've got to try this podcasting thing. We keep talking about it, so what better way to try it than do it?
Exactly.
And then what are we? This will be episode 130. I've spoken to over 100 unique guests. now I'm way beyond my network. I'm now meeting new people and all
Isn't
this
that
kind of
fun?
stuff. So and it's a great way of meeting people. I'm not sure I'm using it for business development because I'm not so much doing that, but
you never know. You never know who's going to come to your company and say, "Hey, Ian, what do you do again? Oh, I can use you." That kind of thing. You never know what business development comes from this stuff.
No, but I think it's one of the things I think that is the topic at the moment is should people start podcasts, because there are so many. So maybe we'll talk about that in a moment. Yeah. But we also need to get to, the number of things you do, Seth, is amazing.
I don't know how you get it done. You
also, apart from having your business to run and 2 podcasts, which I know from experience is enough, you also have your newsletter, Marketing Junto.
Yeah, Marketing Junto is a weekly newsletter. Literally, I kind of set it up sort of like a late-night TV show.
Yeah.
So it goes from my monologue to some interesting links to a featured podcast or something like that. I think Rockstar CMO has been a featured podcast on the newsletter. And then it advertises the 2 podcasts as well on there.
Yeah.
And I like writing. I like doing stuff, and I was like, this is a good way to kind of keep in front of people.
Yeah, that really comes across. So that's Marketing Junto. So I'll include links to all of those in the show notes so that people can find them. But I'm going to get on to our final question now, Seth. We have a regular feature, the Rockstar CMO Simple, where we throw all the bullshit snake oil on overhyped trends that plague this industry we love. What would you like to chuck in?
Podcasting platforms. Everyone is trying to do a podcasting platform, and it's like they don't seem to do it right. I mean, we have YouTube. YouTube might work. YouTube is doing their own kind of podcasting area because people post even their audio podcasts up with a graphic on YouTube. But now Twitter's trying to do something with spaces and podcasts. I'm like, guys, enough. Eventually someone's going to come out with a tool that's going to syndicate to everywhere, but it's just like... It's exhausting to keep up with.
Well, I think for me, as I look at podcasting, I think it needs a hero, though. I mean, if you look at short form video, it's got a hero, TikTok, and Twitter, the short form content. Podcast hasn't quite got that. It hasn't got that discoverability. It hasn't got that algorithm. It hasn't got that big tech machine behind podcasting that tries to...
But do we want the big tech behind it? That's the thing. It's kind of nice that we're young and scrappy still.
Well, that's true, and that's true. But the discoverability of podcasts still needs to get figured out. But I agree with you. I think they're all trying to do it, and none of them have been successful so far. So it sounds like a good candidate for the pool to me.
Exactly. So I'm excited to see where Twitter's thing goes.
Yeah.
It might flounder or might fly away perfectly. Yeah. No pun intended.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've bought the newsletter thing as well, didn't they?
Review. Yeah, they bought Review, which is interesting. I don't think anyone. I know a few people have used it. Most people use it to collect the email addresses, and they go using their ESP.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I should be sending a newsletter as part of Rockstar CMO, and anybody who's a subscriber, thank you very much. I'm sorry I haven't sent anything for about a year. I actually switched across, and I thought I'd give it a go. So if anybody ever receives an email from Rockstar CMO next time, I do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Seth. Well, it was splendid catching up with you. It's always good to stay in touch and talk all things podcast with you when we're not recording. But so thanks for being a friend of the show. And when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you?
Mostly go to, actually you search for Seth M as in Michael Goldstein. You can find me right away. You go for Seth Goldstein, I'm like on page 3 because there's apparently a lot more famous Seth Goldsteins than me. So Seth M Goldstein, you can find me all over the Google, goldsteinmedia.com. You do go to LinkedIn and search for Seth Goldstein. I'm prolific on LinkedIn.
Right. And then we've got
Twitter.
Entrepreneurs Enigma, we've got Digital Marketing Dive, and Marketing Junto, the newsletter. And I'll include links to all that stuff.
And I'm also a father and a dog father. I don't know how. And a husband. I have no idea how I get all this done. I don't sometimes.
Well, congratulations, mate. And I look forward to speaking to you soon. Cheers, buddy.
Awesome.
Cheers, mate. Thank you, Seth. That was wonderful to reminisce about the dawn of us using the interwebs, and some good advice there if you want to do your own gig or work with startups. I will, of course, include all of Seth's links in the show notes. Right, it's the end of the week. Time to wind down, and where better than the Rockstar CMO virtual bar, where I find my friend and content marketing guru, Robert Rose, chief troublemaker at the Content Advisory, for a cocktail and a marketing thought. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, hello, my friend, and welcome to the. It has been a long week, and it is I guess we are on the cusp. I don't know. Do you have a long weekend coming up here?
We just had one. So
you've just had one.
Yeah. So you've got your long weekend, and we had a short week this week. So
That's right. Okay.
Long weekend. Yeah.
So yes, we are on the cusp of a long weekend, and I know many of my colleagues are very happy to be here because it's been August has been a very weird month in the world of business. And so, having said that, I have prepared a special cocktail for what has been across the U.S. an incredibly hot summer. And it is so weird because we are living the world of extremes here in the U.S. because we have on the eastern side of the country, it just seems to never stop raining, and it's basically flooding everywhere and tornadoes and all of that. And then here in the West, of course, we have a drought, extreme drought, hot, dry, and just absolutely, crazy kinds of dry heat. So we are living the extremes. And so I thought we'd finish off, here as we enter into September with a summer punch. And because we just need something to cool us down and make us feel a little better. And so this is a recipe that I've used for a while as a lovely summer punch that's just sort of, a nice drink at the end of the day. And it starts with vodka because why not? Let's not taste anything. You know what I mean? Let's make it as tasteless as we possibly can. And then I love putting in, so I'm a big fan of sort of the liqueur, as you've heard me say on these shows before. So 2 liqueurs here that can be a little difficult to find. The grapefruit liqueur, and any brand that you choose or that is your favorite, and an elderflower liqueur, which is really a lovely way to put in a dash of something. And then a little lemon juice, fresh lemon juice, as always. And then some people like syrup. As you know from many, many recipes, I'm not a big fan of the syrups of any kind. Yeah. But you could put in a muddled strawberry, or just stick a strawberry in there, a cut strawberry in there, if you like, and mix all that together, and you have a wonderful, wonderful summer punch. Also, if you prefer it sparkling, I can add a dash in, or a little bit of a topper of a wonderful rosé prosecco, which is also very, very refreshing as well.
Wow. Yeah, I was just looking at that because I do write notes when you tell me things. And I was thinking, there's no mixer in that. It's just vodka and 2 liqueurs.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right.
That's some hard summer punch you got there, my friend.
Well, like I said,
it's been a long month.
That's right. Well, here's the thing: when you put it over ice, the ice melts, and it makes it it does make it a bit of a,
all right,
of a thing.
Yeah, well, but speaking of ice, I'm going to start off with some ice. Yeah, and I shall, for the new listeners, I shall now attempt to make that very same drink using only the ingredients on my desktop bar. So I'm going to start off with the most, as it turns out, Scottish of vodkas, some Hendrick's gin. Who don't support this show in any way apart from the fact that I imbibe their liquor while we're talking. And then you put in some nice flavourful liqueurs, and I'm going to put in something that the nice people at Fever Tree have mixed up for me, which is some tonic water with some cucumber.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. Cucumber, the most English of elderflowers.
Yes, and liqueurs, actually, yes, as things go.
I'm going to give that a try. Oh, that's delicious, Robert, and very good for a hot day like this. Very nice. I could drink one of these every week. And what are we calling that?
We're just calling it a summer punch, and it does give you a punch. Let me be very, very clear. It is about getting punched.
It is indeed. It is indeed, especially when you put that much gin in. Well, okay.
There you go. This is the point. This is the point.
Well, that's delicious. So, where will we be drinking these summer punches this week?
Well, we have to get out of this heat. That is absolutely the case. So we have to get out of the U.S. for sure. And I'm thinking we have to get north. And I'm thinking of, I was just watching this wonderful documentary about Alaska, actually. And the summers in Alaska, I've been to Alaska, and it's absolutely spectacular. Now, when I was there, it was the fall, and it was just starting to get cool. But the late summer in Alaska can just be absolutely spectacular. And so I think we find ourselves somewhere along a rocky coast somewhere in some, I'm sure, they don't have a lot of fine dining in Alaska, but finding some place where we can drink these summer punches in a relatively cool, and I say relatively cool, area where we can watch the water, the dramatic, and see the mountains behind us and see the end of summer sort of end.
That sounds splendid. And I would imagine, apart from your fine dining, I wonder if you're going to have trouble finding grapefruit liqueur and elderflower liqueur as well.
Oh, I'll bring it all with us. Yes, we'll bring all the liquor with us because it is within the U.S., so I can carry it all in my bag.
I love it. I've never been to Alaska. Is it a bit like the Nordics? Long nights, long days during the summer, and long nights in the winter, and all that kind of good stuff.
That's right. Yeah.
It sounds really nice. So we're sipping these drinks. We're enjoying the last of the summer in Alaska. And talk turns to marketing. What are we going to be talking about this week, Robert?
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about change. And what I've noticed that there's something interesting that happens, and I don't know why it's taken me this long to find this and see this pattern, but it's a challenge that I see again and again and again, which is, when we start looking at incremental improvements, there's often a case where incremental improvements fail to provide any level of excitement to motivate any kind of change. What I mean by that is that, you've got something that's suboptimal in the business, right? Maybe it's a content process, maybe it's the way that you do the website, maybe it's the way that you manage digital assets, maybe it's the way that you do paid media, whatever it is. It's broken, but it's not so broken as to be disastrous, right? It's just suboptimal. And so the anticipated pain of changing into something different or new feels greater than the pain that might arise if you change nothing. And in other words, we're driving on three wheels, but we're driving. And so, changing that, stopping to change the tire feels like too much work, basically.
Yeah.
And so it's this weird catch-22 because nobody wants to throw out any existing approach to this because they worked hard on it and they're continuing to work hard on it. And it's, they're busy. It's like nobody's going, oh, I've got so much time that we can try this new wonderful process that's net new. And they start questioning whether any reinvention at all are going to prove as amazing, or as wonderful as it was promised. And there was actually, even 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago now, Seth Godin actually wrote about this, trying to make something incrementally better. And what he said, and this is a quote from him, he said, if you define success as getting closer and closer to some mythical perfection, some agreed upon standard, it's really difficult to become remarkable. Basically, you can't get rounder than round. And what he was talking about was how hard it is to actually make those incremental changes because it's often, you're focusing so much time on those incremental changes that you're not spending any time reinventing yourself. And so, but the quote has stayed with me. And I've been thinking about the idea of new and selling change when things aren't that bad. And it came to a head recently. I was working with this client and, the content team was suffering, right? It was not a good thing. They were basically this on-demand vending machine from every other part of the business, mostly product marketing, right? They were just getting requests and requests and requests and requests. And so the product team didn't know that the requests that they were putting in, because they're all siloed, so much of it was duplicative and so much of it was, stuff that really shouldn't get created to begin with. And the content team couldn't really say no because they were getting it from all these different angles. And so we recommended that they change the process, right? They add this content planning to their development process and add in this new workflow that might help them get insight into what should get created, what should be prioritized, what should be added. And basically, the content team was like, yay, new change. We're all for it. This is going to help us. Yeah. But the product marketing team went, my world isn't broken, so I don't care. So adding something to my workflow is not going to help me. So therefore, why am I changing? And so they didn't change. And so then you go, oh, okay, well, then what happened? Well, nothing happened. Nobody got fired. No massive failures occurred. Everybody just went back to doing the way the things they were doing. And the problem is that now the content team is sort of in this rut and they're just not inspired. And so the lesson that I have learned is that there may be value. There may be simply value in doing something new just because we don't do it now. In other words, there is value in trying something new just because it's new. And because it gives us a new perspective. It gives us a new perspective. And so what I want to tell that product marketing team is, no, you're right. It may not be beneficial to you, but it might be. And you won't know until you actually take the new perspective. In other words, it may be that driving on 3 wheels is okay, but if you add the 4th, you may have a completely different perspective about what driving even means. And so that's the kind of thing, and it's a really hard thing. I don't have a good pat answer for it, but it's a really interesting thing to me to watch businesses these days be so reluctant to new because they believe, quote unquote, we don't know how. And they equate with we don't know how to it's inefficient. And that's a mistake, I think, because new can sometimes be better simply because it's new.
Yeah. Plus, I think that, like you're saying, like trying something new creates a new habit of trying something new, doesn't it? And the problem is there is no history or culture of trying something new. So you don't try something new. But if you just throw these things in every now and again, you create that, right? That agility, I guess.
Yeah, it's that, that classic, there's the classic thing that when we're, for us as individuals, right? How many times have you said to yourself, oh, I'm not going to delegate that task because it would just take too long to teach somebody to do that. And therefore I'll just do it myself. I'll just continue to do it myself. And so you never do spend the time to teach the new process to yourself or to the person that you would delegate it to. And thus you never get the perspective of what it would be like to actually not have to do that task, to actually delegate it. And so it prevents you from growing. It prevents you from doing things. And it's the refusal to even try that's the problem. It's not the actual thing itself.
And you feel really sorry for that content team because the problem is that often happens in organizations, where there is there's friction and squeaky wheel, and the people closest to it can see that. It's just that it's really then very hard to communicate that pain outwards, isn't it? Because it's your friction and your squeaky wheel, and you are not empowered to make that change. But it would be better for the organization if it did.
That's right, and that's the other insidious part of this is when. It's sort of it's the NIMBY thing, right? Which is not in my backyard. And so change is fine as long as it doesn't involve me. Which is hard and really hard in business. And especially for the parts of the business that don't have any power to execute change. It's the classic Jerry Seinfeld, right? It's one thing to take the reservation. It's another thing to actually hold the reservation, it's one thing to say the change, but it's another thing to actually make it. Yeah.
It's so funny because I actually did a presentation last week at an event for the first time for ages since pre-COVID. And I actually used a story of me going to Hertz and having that Seinfeld experience. And then you're thinking, I probably need to explain to a lot of these people who Seinfeld is.
Nice.
You tell it a lot better than I do. I love that. I love that scene. That's excellent. All right, mate. So, and I do hope there's a happy ending for that content team. I do.
I hope there is too. There isn't thus far, but there hopefully there will be down the road. Yes.
All right, buddy. So, for happy endings that people might read about, where
Oh,
might
dear.
they find
Oh
those?
my! Oh my! Oh my! Let's not go there.
All right, I'll try and rephrase that.
Yeah.
Where on the interwebs where might people find stories like that, Robert?
You might find it on our website. Suddenly I became 17 years old. I'm not sure. You'll find it on our website at contentadvisory.net.
Cool. And when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you?
LinkedIn is my main platform of choice these days, and I'd love to connect with each and every one of you.
Splendid. And more important for me, as I'm quite selfish about these things, will I see you in the bar next week?
You will indeed.
I look forward to it, mate. Thank you very much. I'll see you then. Thank you, Robert. There we go. We all love change, apart from when it happens to us. So, that's a wrap on episode 130 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. Thanks again to Jeff, Seth and Robert for sharing their insight. Please say hello to them. I'll include all their links in the show notes, which you can find on your favourite podcast app or at rockstarcmo.com, where you can also find all our previous episodes. But most of all, thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. So, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? Let us know on the socials, or please drop a rating or a review in your favourite podcast app. Or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, Jeff is back in the marketing studio. I go backstage with Andrew Davis, CMO at Paddle, and Robert will be back in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar. Until then, have a great week, and I hope you'll again join us here next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.